Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, a podcast where we watch movies from the past and ask that age-old question, are they still good? This week, Indiana Jones, Last Crusade, the third of these movies, and one I teased as being better than the previous movie, Temple of Doom, from my memory. And I guess the challenge becomes, does that remain true on this sort of rewatch as an adult? With a fully formed brain. It's a strange sentence. I don't know why I said that. And I knew it was weird before I said it because I paused. But anyway. Joining me as always, the wonderful Chris Billingham. Say hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah. That never gets old, does it?
You know what? That's one of those like dad jokes that the reality is no one ever enjoys hearing it, but the person saying it has a fucking great time.
Yeah, you don't feel slightly dirty doing that joke again?
No, I'm okay with my choices.
Fair enough. So, Indiana Jones.
Well, for those wondering, I'd say this up top every time, but if this is your first Rewind Reviews Indiana Jones podcast, we have done the other two chronological movies to this. We do a trilogy every year. This is our trilogy this year.
Mm-hmm.
So our thoughts and history with the franchise, Dan's experience watching it as a kid, etc., is all covered in the Raiders episode.
Yes. Yeah. Because that is something. The format of this podcast is normally we sort of talk about our history with the film first, then sort of overall review, whether we recommend, don't recommend, and then we sort of go into sort of like the nitty gritty and often do nitpicks and other stuff like that.
And we often do a non-spoilery would we recommend review, but kind of with these ones, it's fucking Indiana Jones. Of course we recommend you watch these movies. Yeah. Of course we recommend you watch this movie. It's Indiana Jones, so we'll launch straight into it. I'm intrigued to throw to you first because I couldn't work out from your intro whether you felt it maybe didn't hold up as well as when you were a kid. So what were your give me your thoughts, Dan?
Well, I'll say this, Chris. I was thinking, I'll tell you what I'll do in my intro. I'll make it not clear. I'll draw the listener in, and you know how I know it worked, Chris, because you're intrigued.
Because I was drawn in. Yeah, man. I represent the listener here, thinking,
1 point to Dan.
This might not be your daddy's review of Indiana Jones. Is that the phrase? This might not be your.
Yeah. Sure.
Your mother's? Yeah. Your grandmother's? I don't know what the phrase is.
This ain't your daddy's Star Trek. So, I just remember that because everyone kept saying about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. Everyone kept just saying, this ain't your daddy's Star Trek. I used to just think, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I think you and me repeatedly using the word daddy is far worse than the Hello Chris joke. Way more uncomfortable for people, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon so. So like I said last week, historically, my least favorite of the original trilogy was Temple of Doom. As a youngster, and I did have some criticisms for the film last week. We both very much enjoyed it, but there were elements of it we didn't love. Racism. I didn't care for the opening sequence at all. So there were some issues. It had quite a dark tone, maybe not as fun as Raiders. So you'd sort of have to sort of weigh up. Like I gained a bunch of really good action because I think the action probably is better in Temple, but you trade that off with the darker plot, slightly more annoying love interest.
We didn't really mind the violence, did we? A lot of people at the time didn't like the violence, but we weren't too bothered about that.
Yeah, I guess that's a shift in sensibilities, isn't it? I think I mean the first one, a guy gets eaten up by a plane propeller. That's pretty violent. I feel that feels like an odd complaint to me, but I get it. But it's a bit of a strange one. So going to Last Crusade with the memory being that I enjoyed it more as a kid, and I'll tell you now on this rewatch, it has nothing but reaffirmed my view that this is the superior movie to Temple of Doom. I think there's a trade-off that occurs. I think this movie leans into the thing that Raiders is so good at is being both an action movie and a fun romp, right? The previous one, Temple of Doom, is really good on the action stuff, but a little less so on the fun romper meter. This movie's got the fun romper meter turned right up to 11, but the trade-off is that the action maybe isn't as engaging because you're making more jokes throughout the action scenes. You're spending a lot more time and shots doing that than you are building tension through the action scenes. But in terms of just sitting down and watching them, I much prefer this one. This one is a real joy. Like, it is... I mean, and this is not to say, by the way, that I don't like Temple of Doom. We talked about it last week. Obviously, Temple of Doom is great for its own reasons. But yeah, if you're just saying to me, like, stick an Indiana Jones movie on right now, you choose between Temple and this, I'm choosing this. The interplay between Indy and his dad, the mixing up the sort of team once again, so the dynamic is completely different, but this time giving him sort of two sort of older sort of sidekicks that are maybe less capable, rather than a sort of rather than what they did last movie, which they gave them sort of like a a less experienced sort of female protagonist or sort of co-protagonist that was like a fish out of water in her own sense because she wasn't really used to going on these kinds of adventures. Instead, they gave him two sort of slightly less a bit sort of helpless in a different way characters in Brody and his dad Henry Jones. And it's so much fun, and the jokes are so genuinely good, and the action is still pretty good. Not quite up to the standard of the last one, but still very enjoyable nonetheless. So I just think for me, the balance, while different, neither of them really get the balance right quite like Raiders did. Raiders remains, I think, the best of these three, probably, or at least objectively. But in terms of just having a good rip-roaring time, Chris, I fucking love this movie. I had a really good time rewatching this, and to the point where I made almost no notes at all. And I mean, like, almost no notes. One of my notes just says no ticket to remind me to credit that joke because it's one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie.
Oh, it's a great joke.
Absolutely fantastic. Like, every time it floors me. So yeah, I just think for being what it is, like a fun adventure movie, this is way better at achieving that, I think, than Temple, because it is just a lot more fun. There's a lot more joy to be had in this one. So yeah, I came out feeling pretty much. I guess my view on these hasn't changed. I still think Raiders is probably the best one, and then closely followed by this one, and then probably closely followed by Temple. I don't think there's a huge amount in it, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. There we go. I think that is the right order. Part of me loves an outlier. Part of me loves the one that's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. I compared it last week to enjoying Prisoner of Azkaban because it's not. It feels quite distinct. It's not about Voldemort, etc.
Yes,
but I think. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I couldn't. I tried to fight that. Neither Dan or I have had a lot of sleep, so apologies if we're sleepy and tired. Yeah, I got 4, which I got 4.5. I think I was really I hadn't managed to watch the film, so it was a real let in bed at 1 a.m. going. Do I watch it now or do I watch it in the morning?
Oh shit! Yeah. So this is a choice because I knew I wasn't going to have the time to do that, so I ended up watching the film like 2 days ago, which is unusual. Yeah, I don't normally watch the movies.
That's I'll burst with you, mate. It's a better cool.
What's that,
it's better cool than just because I'm like, well, I'm not getting the sleep either way. But anyway, I think the other, as you indicated, the relationship with Sean Connery's character, Henry Jones Sr. It adds so much heart and exploration of Indiana as a character that we've not had in the other movies, and I think that trade-off is that's the other thing this movie has, traded off with the action, which I really loved. I thought the chemistry between them was fantastic. The arc that Sean Connery's character goes on is brilliant. Like you, I really love the pairings. I love that Marcus is back, and this time he decides to go on the adventure. How fucking great is that? Now there is an element of
they've changed his character completely.
They changed his character completely, but also to get sort of headline criticisms or maybe a discussion. Now, I'm with Dan. I love this film. I would probably rank them Raiders, this Temple. But it's close, It really is close because I really love the Sean Connery character. I really love the fun action. I think this movie is the funniest of all three. I think it feels incredibly modern and quippy.
Yes.
Like, it feels really modern and quippy.
Not obnoxiously so, though, because I know that's something people are starting to criticise about sort of modern superhero films, for example.
Yes.
But I don't think this falls into that pit. I think, if anything, a lot of the MCU, like I think I said this about Raiders too, but I think it's extra true here. I think a lot of the tone that the MCU has been using for the last, 10, 15 years more, it's from this. I really do.
Yeah. Absolutely, completely agree. And it's so interesting watching it with that lens. I think the kind of headline criticism, but for all the reasons I've just said, I'm toying with whether I like it even more maybe than Raiders. So. And I was last week, so in my head, these three movies are so close together.
Right.
I think, but the trade-off with this, the criticism I would give, which is probably a bigger criticism, but again, the good stuff outweighs it for me, than I've given any of these movies, is, we talked last week, and I've subsequently, seen other people in YouTube videos and stuff talk about the backlash that Spielberg had from Temple of Doom. And I think you can really feel that in this movie.
Yes.
You can really feel him trying to sequelize Raiders of the Lost Ark. The chronological order of these movies may even be the best order to watch them in, because you can really feel the beats. We see him as a professor at school, relatively needlessly. It's quite a fun reminder of how dull it's pushed the exploration of the character a little further. Last time we just saw he's a professor. This time he's a professor that's, being hounded by students like he's in the fucking Beatles. He's got paper piled up high, and he surrounds himself in his office with artifacts. He wants the adventure. He escapes out the room. He escapes out the window and has the adventure. So it does more with the school thing, but it feels a little bit like, what were the beats in Raiders? And let's follow that blueprint. Which, I'm sure for people after Temple, it's a bit comparable to, The Force Awakens after the prequels. You're a bit like, fuck it, yeah, follow the blueprint of what works. We've just had something that some people would say didn't, so let's do that. But I think you can feel him trying to not make it too violent. You can feel him trying to emote Raiders, and I think you can really feel that throughout the movie. Now, maybe that's not completely fair, because a huge counter to that is some of the stuff you've already brought up, but it's a completely different dynamic in terms of the people. The father adds something completely new, like we say, it's funnier exploration of Indiana, etc. But I did feel watching the film, it absolutely feels like a response to the Temple of Doom, I think.
Yeah, I would say it's a counter steer. It's like they steered left in the last movie, and they've overcorrected in this one. They've really wanged the wheel right, and it's just the car's just spinning at this point. You know what I mean? It's which is really interesting, because because I don't think to me it doesn't feel like they've gone Raiders. It feels more like they've just gone anti-Temple. Because I think that structurally these movies have all been the same. It's all been, flashbacky or early adventure, cut to Indy in his nerd outfit, off on adventure. They kind of cheated with Temple, because the previous sort of early adventure leads directly sort of into the start of the real adventure. So they have him get in his nerd outfit when he arrives at the palace to have that sort of beat, because they wanted it to be one flowing narrative. But other than that, all three movies follow the same structure, mostly. Sort of separate individual adventure at the beginning, a quieter moment to sort of set up what the main adventure is, whatever the MacGuffin is. Then the series of escapades that lead to that MacGuffin. So I don't think I think Temple sometimes disguises that it's got that structure in the fact that they lead directly into each other. There's no there's no cut, there's no time skip. It's just, Indy's in that, restaurant, whatever it was, the club. They're on the plane crashes in India. Then he's nerd outfit time, which I think there's a contractual thing that he has to wear that outfit at least once a movie, so he's a nerd. You got to really understand it. And then off on the main quest, so to speak. But yeah, I think tonally you're right, 100%. It's absolutely a response to Temple. And because here's the thing, though, with Temple, I don't know if it's response to Temple. I feel a little bit like it's their own feelings on Temple that they're countering. Because I don't get the impression Lucas, Spielberg, or any of the people that have worked on these movies give a flying fuck what anyone else thinks about these movies. I feel like, though, we had a section in last week's trivia that was everyone who made this movie hates it. There were stories of Ford not being thrilled with it, although he has publicly always defended Temple. We had definite comments from Lucas and Spielberg about not being, in hindsight, happy with the tone. So I'm almost feeling like this is a countersteer to themselves. This is like okay, we're not thrilled with how the last one went. Let's do this. Let's do this right. Was there trivia about this? Let's see. So yeah, I'll sneak some trivia in now, just because it's relevant to what we're talking about. So Spielberg's favourite movie in the Indiana Jones film franchise is this one. Spielberg likes this one best. And when they sat down to sort of sort this out, Spielberg has gone on record since saying that he made this movie for two reasons. One, he was wanting to fulfill a 3-movie obligation he'd kind of made with Lucas, but mostly to atone for the criticism that he received and his own feelings on Temple of Doom. So this kind of suggests it's both. And he actually dropped out of 2 other movies to do this one. So he really wanted to right the ship, in his view. So due to his commitments on this movie, Spielberg had to drop out of directing both Big, the Tom Hanks movie Big, and Rain Man. Both pretty big films from that era.
Yeah.
So he clearly really wanted to get this right. And you can tell, I think, there's a lot of love put into this film, and I think that's evident when you watch it. It's again, there's so much joy. It really does feel the exact, tonally, the polar opposite to the previous movie. So yeah,
yeah, I think that makes sense. And you know what? It achieves that,
right? Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it absolutely achieves that, and I can see, especially because, the father-son exploration and where that story goes, and like I said earlier, the arc that Henry goes on.
Arc of the Covenant.
Wait.
I see what you did there.
Yeah,
yep.
Nice.
Don't open it, Chris. Melt your face off.
That feels incredibly Spielberg, doesn't it? Like, warm-hearted E.T. Spielberg. Feels like
right.
That. I can.
That's funny you should say that. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Actually, it's almost weird. Temple of Doom is this sort of almost negative as it is, because that actually doesn't feel very Spielberg. That feels more like a trait of a Lucas. He's a bit more, movie wise, he's a more cynical filmmaker.
Or a Spielberg going through divorce, as we discussed last week.
Right. Well, 100%. Yeah. Well, actually, was it Lucas going through divorce and Spielberg on a breakup, or Spielberg getting divorced, Lucas on a breakup? It was something like that. But yeah, I think there's something to that. I think, but I think in general, if you look at the sort of canon of like Lucas's films versus the canon of sort of like Spielberg's films, I feel like Spielberg goes happier, or at least hopeful, more often than not.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair, and I think I can see why. Therefore, given all the stuff with Indiana and his dad, I can see why this would be Spielberg's favorite.
Yeah, I think that is the beating heart of this movie, and what a smart choice. We should get into that a little more, because I mean, okay, so I have a thought on this, right? I really like that this movie makes the point that like they need to discuss something, but they need to sort of discuss it. They need to figure out their relationship, but they end up figuring it out across the journey without really ever having like They have a couple of conversations that sort of tease the stuff that they need to figure out. There's that whole thing about like I didn't tell him things, that whole stuff. But it's never no. There's never actually a sit down that actually like airs any real like physical grievances, and I think you could argue the movie kind of avoids actually doing the work, and just they sort of become friendly across the movie. Like they get on better by the end of the movie, and it never actually like outlines what the issues were to begin with. Other than just a rift became, but it still somehow works, and I'm not really sure how. So I feel like you could. I feel like a smarter person could phrase it differently and make it make more sense what I just was saying. But I feel like you could also make that a criticism. I think it didn't really bother me, but there was a part of my brain going, this is all very ethereal. Like they never really actually bring up tangible grievances with each other that explain, several years of not talking to each other.
So, collectively, we've got two people here with only 7 hours sleep between them. But I'm going to say, let's try and do it. And as you said it, like, how does the movie achieve that? I'm like, how does the movie achieve that? So the first theory I've got that came into my head is because so much of their difficulties is clearly rooted in he couldn't ever see past his quest for the Holy Grail, and it clouded everything, and he never had any time for his family because of it. And even though they never have the discussion, and Sean Connery doesn't ever go, I was a twat, actually, in the end, in that moment, he chooses Indiana over the Grail, and he tells him to let it go, showing that he is, in this instance, choosing his son, and his son is the most valuable thing. So Indiana is getting what he always wanted, and by doing it, his dad is sort of acknowledging, this is what I should be doing, I was wrong, etc. So does the movie get away with it because they show you that? They show you that progression. They don't need to thrash it out, because is there going to be anything more than... Is there going to be anything he could say that could possibly compare with him choosing his son over the Grail?
But how do we know, Chris, that he'd have chosen his son over the Grail if he doesn't also fall over the cliff himself to also learn the same lesson that the other character just learnt? Maybe he needs to fall in as well and be hanging and reaching for the Grail, and then that other guy, Brody, can come over, and Brody can be like, it's not worth it, and then he can agree, and then he can sort of move to the side, and then Brody can fall into the hole as well and be holding on and reaching for the Grail and being like, oh yeah, this is that lesson I just told you to learn.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Dan and I met doing a script writing degree, and we both still write, not as much as we would like to. I'm going to go ahead, Dan, and recommend that you never try and write on 3 hours sleep.
No, I think you're missing my point. Maybe I'm criticizing something else about the movie. I'm criticizing.
No,
I'm criticizing the choice to do, because so this is a separate argument, so I'll come back to it. But yeah, I didn't like Indy falling in the hole.
I think it's okay. I quite like it because he actively could. It's not as clean as other ways you could do it, but Sean Connery's character, and it's just Henry and Indiana is how we're going to define. Indiana could, if he pushed, try and reach for it, and Henry actively tells him not to do that.
Right.
So Henry does make a choice there. He literally tells Indiana, which is in some ways even more powerful. It's not, this is a man that has been shown in flashbacks to be a bit of a dick to his son. Like, Indiana's a hero in the opening sequence, which is fantastic, and obviously we it's incredible, really, that we're 25 minutes into this podcast and we've not yet praised River Phoenix. We'll get there. But, like, he's a dick to him. Like, the idea of that man not pushing his son to the limits to try and get the Grail. The idea of that man not going, no, fucking reach out, it ain't that far. And going, no, let it go, and I'm going to pull you up. Like, I think that's very powerful. Yeah, it works for me with Indiana Fooligan.
Yeah, but again, I think you're slightly missing my point. Yeah, in isolation, it works. But 30 seconds earlier, Chris, Elsa was hanging in the fucking hole, reaching for the Grail, and Indiana Jones was telling her not to fucking grab it and that it wasn't worth it. And then she dies, then he falls in and does the same fucking thing. That's why I was joking about then Henry falls in and then Brody falls in, because we're just creating a fucking chain of people telling the person in the hole, don't bother, and then falling in themselves and reaching for it. It's fucking insane. All of that stuff you just said is absolutely true, but massively hurt by the fact that 30 seconds earlier, Indiana was telling Elsa it wasn't worth it. So why the fuck is he reaching for it when he's in the same position?
Because I think Elsa's trying to impress... Well, Elsa, I really like... This isn't a counter, but I just really love Henry being like, she didn't even believe in the Grail. Like, I thought that was very, very funny. And, like, poignant. Yeah, I guess it's the for me it's the tragedy of that relationship as in Indiana and Henry's, and the tragedy of like parental child relationships sometimes. You know, Indiana is and look, you could argue I'm reaching here. I get that. I agree and understand what you're saying. I'm just, for the purpose of discussion, trying to counter. I think you can make an argument that that's the tragedy of their relationship. Indiana is telling her not to go for it because, he can't think of a single reason why it's worth her going for it. But then when he's got the opportunity to get it for his dad, he still feels compelled to try because he's still that kid thinking he's going to be in trouble if he doesn't. It's a reach. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just trying to, counter for discussion.
Yeah, I guess you could certainly fansplain it that way. I just found it frustrating from a writing perspective because it is a good end for Elsa, for her to die trying to get it. But I honestly think you just do that without Indy. Like, have her leap for it and have her tumble down the hole with the Grail landing on the ledge. Because,
yeah, but I do also like the complex. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, because I just think like it's really hard to believe why Indy's reaching for it at all when he was just like, and I'm not even kidding. 30 seconds. I know I keep saying that. It's like it's no time at all between it's not worth it. I can just reach it from the same character. It's just you can't sell me on that beat. If he's just had the exact opposite opinion, I can't fathom how you expect me to believe that the character has changed their mind in that such short space of time about whether it is or isn't worth it. I really feel like there was an easy solution, was just not to have Indy. He witness, sure, but be so directly involved in her doing that, because what you're forcing is a situation where he has to have two opposing viewpoints in the space of a minute. And it's just, it bugged me a lot, because I agree with you that it does do a lot of the heavy lifting for the father-son relationship. And actually, when it's a relationship that's clearly based on two characters who aren't great on communicating, the idea that it can come through in a moment of choice is great. It just hurts it that we'd literally just demonstrated that Indy didn't think it was worth it. So for him reaching for it just feels like, wait, this character just is doing what the scene needs him to do.
Yeah, I think that's fair. My again, for the purpose of discussion, I think one defense of Indy and her is that I do really like the complexity and the layers to her character, and I think that notion that her making the choice to deliberately poison and give the wrong cup to the villain, and then Indy trying to save her when he was willing for her to. When previously he was just, well, you've gone with the Nazis, like you're on your own, and then sort of coming round to each other a little bit, and her kind of doing the right thing and him recognizing that and trying to save her. I think that's quite nice. I think that's more complexity than, unfortunately, a lot of female characters in action movies at the time got. It's more complexity than some female characters in this franchise have had, and I like that, and I like that him reaching out to her and being so involved reinforces that idea a bit.
So I guess what you're saying is that what you gain out of that is worth the weird inconsistency between that scene and then the moment that follows it.
I don't know if it's worth it, but it's potentially why I didn't notice the inconsistency. It's potentially why that didn't come to me until you said about it and you pointed it out, and that makes me go, oh yeah, no, he's right.
So what we've really learned here is that Elsa needed to let it go.
Let it go, let it go. I am one with the sky and stars. I don't know if that's
I don't think those are the lyrics. I don't think those are the lyrics.
I'm here to make it snow. Let it... Wow, I really didn't... Hold on. The sun glows bright in the mountains, and I'm not even sure that's right.
No, that's right.
But there's footprints.
No, not a footprint to be seen. I've just pulled up the lyrics.
The sun glows bright on the mountain tonight.
Not a footprint.
With no wind left to show. I don't know it.
Oh my god.
I like that song as well.
It's a good song.
Yeah. The catchy
anyway, it's just because the character's called Elsa, and I'm shit to let it go.
No, it was great. No, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that joke.
So I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it's so frustrating because I think you're right. Both moments individually really do work. One works and does wonders for Elsa as a sort of pseudo villain. Like her position is very interesting, being sort of torn between her goals and who she's had to team up with to make them happen. And I think that is really interesting, and her sort of obsession with the Grail is in a weird way an echo of Henry's in some ways. And her reaching for it and being told by someone, you need to not go for that, it's not worth it, is a good way for her to then die because she makes the wrong choice, right? She still tries, even with that. It's just unfortunate that the very next scene requires Indy to feel differently, and there's a consistency.
But not even the next scene. Literally, what happens next?
Yeah. It's just strange, and I still really do feel like you just commit to it. Then just have everyone follow the hole one by one each time. The person on the top is the person that's about to fall in, but they go, it's not worth it. Then they fall. They go, oh, it could be worth it. And we just do that until every character is, and they're all just hanging off that cliff, all reaching for the Grail. Till there's no one left on the surface to tell them it's not worth it.
And then they all die.
They all die. I'd have written a much better version of this movie. I don't know what you're talking about, Chris. I'm a great writer on 3 hours sleep.
Yeah, I think our tiredness is the equivalent to George Lucas and Spielberg's personal problems.
So anyway, we there isn't really a solution to that. I think it's a weird inconsistency, but both beats individually work, so we're just kind of at a stalemate there, and that there's no real solution to that. It's just one of those unfortunate things. So, but I think you're right though. You've won me over because I was starting, even though I love this movie and really enjoyed it, there was a part of me thinking they didn't really do enough to establish, what the crux and what the actual issues of their relationship was. And you're absolutely right. Even though we got derailed with the Elsa element, Henry and Indiana's relationship coming down to the Grail and it being solved by Henry making the choice that his son's life is more important than that is, in a weird way, a resolution. in a more practical
I think so.
sense.
I felt so.
And for two characters that clearly aren't good at communicating, I think that's correct. That's probably the right way to do it. They never got to say the things, but he got to. You didn't get to tell him, but he got to show him that what he meant to him. And that's
because there's two. They both have a moment of literally like not being able to talk about it. So the first one, and both are sort of. Well, one's sort of hidden, one's just outright played for a really good joke, which is, we never talk. Well, we've got time now. What do you want to ask me? And then Indy can't think of anything and doesn't ask him anything.
Yeah,
and then you've got...
exactly. Yeah, we had nothing. What did you want to tell me? What did you want to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great scene. One of my favourite scenes in the whole movie, actually. I think it's fantastic.
So you've got that, and then you've also got Henry being like, I never had a chance to tell him things. I only needed 5 minutes. And then Indy's back and next to him, and he hugs him and has a nice moment, but he doesn't then go, let me tell you things, son. I think they've set up that these are two characters that are never going to talk about it. So having it be seen instead is, works for me personally.
Yeah, and I thought as well, actually, we haven't talked about this element of it. I think Indy being willing to, like, go forward and almost help the Nazis solve the puzzle to save his dad. Because for those who don't recall, the climax of this movie, they end up in the temple, and there are 3 challenges, 3 trials to test the person trying to attain the Grail. And the Nazis keep sending soldiers who keep dying because they're not, they're not a penitent man. They're not worthy. Basically, they're dying.
Well, they don't kneel. I think it's more the.
I know. I was trying to avoid that because that is a real obvious criticism, but like, because it does just come down to them not being smart enough. Yeah. But that's not what the movie wants us to feel. The movie wants us to feel it's to do with like, because the second trial is genius. That is genuinely a brilliant idea, because the second one, which is the leap of faith moment, really does work.
The leap of faith is third. The second one is stepping on the stones that spell out the name of God.
Oh, God, you're right. Sorry, apologies. You're exactly right. Yeah, 100%. Sorry, the leap of faith, which is the third of the trials. I think they should have got stuck on that. But then you don't get to see Indy going through all 3, I guess. But it just feels like that would have been the place. The Nazis were too fearful, too scared. They didn't they couldn't pass that point. And it's Indy that has the faith and the belief that there's something going to be there to support him. And it's a really clever idea of it's a rock bridge that looks exactly like
so good.
It's the shot when the camera slightly pans left to reveal it and then back to it's one of my favorite shots in the whole movie. I literally no matter how many times I see it, my mouth falls open every time. It's just stunning. It's a great shot. It's a really cool trick. It looks brilliant. 100%. I really like it.
And you are right. Like that notion of cowardice and that notion of that's where they crumble because there's. Do you know what I mean? But then again, I suppose the challenge with that is if they get past the first quest. Then there's going to be, but they don't get past the second quest. There's a shitload of rocks missing in that. That second quest, you really just need to wait. You need to wait it out, don't you?
Yeah.
If you're the 50th person attempting that, you've probably got more of a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that. I don't know. Maybe you put the leap of faith one first, then, and the other 2 follow it, so they couldn't get past literally step 1 still, but it's a different step 1. You just swap them around.
Yeah,
and because then it's not. Oh well, Indy thought to duck and they didn't. It's Indy got there, was the only one who got to that point. Because I'd like to think someone in that group was smart enough. But people, because am I right? Am I misremembering? Because a couple of days ago, don't just multiple people just go in and get chopped up from the first one, just like
I think maybe my memory is definitely seeing one person's head come back out.
Right,
which is also you'd think a bit of a hint. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. So doesn't the second guy? Well, I'll just duck then.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim, Jim didn't duck. We're going to send in Dave next, and I'm telling him to duck.
Yeah, if I saw someone walk in a passageway and then their head gets chopped off, and I've got to walk into that passageway after, I'm at least leaning. Do you know what I mean? I'm at least crouching.
Yeah, last guy lost his head. I'm probably going to be a bit cautious. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. But no, I think that third trial is so clever. It does almost make you wish that all three had been that clever, because it's such a great test of someone's character, while also just being a practical one. It's not a supernatural thing. It's just a practical test of someone's character. And even actually, the second one is a test of their knowledge, their understanding. That's also reasonably good. In fact, if anything, you put that one first, that would have also presumably stumped the Nazis. Although, as Chris said, the waiting game on that one, you could still theoretically get past it. And
I love how in between Henry and his and Indy, they give the I can't remember their names, but the villains the way to get across. Henry says out loud "duck," and then Henry says out loud about the name beginning with an I.
Yeah,
and then Indy, in order to find his way back, presumably Indy scatters something across the bridge so it's visible. So like between the two of them, they get them across.
Yes, very much so. It's a great trial though. I thought that was so cool.
Oh, I loved it.
Why we were talking about it for a reason though. What was that? We got distracted talking about them. What led us to the trials? I can't remember.
Don't know. But brilliant.
I'm sure it was clever.
The trials are clever. It just felt so iconically Indiana Jones. It was great.
Yeah. And again, I cannot give the production team enough credit for like that. Just that one camera move every time. I love it. It's really, really good.
I've got a little comment and then 4 words for you, Dan. So here's my little separate comment that's just an observation, and take a shot because I'm going to reference Doctor Who here. I thought the scene and the use of Adolf Hitler in this movie was brilliant. But the Doctor Who reference is that there were a few people complaining about the episode "Let's Kill Hitler" because they felt that it's got Hitler in the title. They didn't really use Hitler. And Stephen Moffat's defense. Now, I don't think you should need someone saying something externally. I think the text should do it. But Moffat's view was, yeah, but how annoyed would Hitler be with that? Like, imagine that. Hitler finds out he's the villain in a show and he's locked in the cupboard for the entire episode. He's like, fuck yeah, put Hitler in the cupboard. And I just thought that was quite a fun defense of that. And the way it's done here, the notion that Hitler in this movie is so arrogant that Indy is literally holding the thing he wants. It is in his hands. But he's got such an ego that he autographs it and gives it back.
It's so good. It's
such a clever idea.
Yeah, I mean, on the Doctor Who thing, the episode's called "Let's Kill Hitler," not Hitler on the Adventure Fun Times. It's a story about people making the choice to go back in time and try and kill Hitler and their journey. It's not about Hitler.
Yeah, and it's playing on that whole, if you could go back in time, would you kill Hitler? It's playing on that notion.
Dumb criticism from dumb people. I don't care that Hitler spends the episode in the closet. If anything, that's one of the funnier parts of the episode is when Rory is like, shut up, Hitler, and punches him or whatever. It's great.
Yeah.
It's a good moment. Good. But I absolutely... I'd forgotten Hitler's in this movie. When he bumps into him, and it all suddenly hit me, and I went, "Oh my god, he autographs the book, doesn't he?" Like it sort of came back to me as I was watching. It's such a great one. For those who don't remember the scene, Indy has had to go into Berlin to retrieve. Is it the book that time? It's to retrieve the book. That's what it is, because they lost the book. The book has information on how to get past the trials. Presumably, it's just one page says duck, And the next page has the passcode, but the I is circled, and then the third page just says it's a bridge, you dummy.
It's coded. There's coded text in there.
I know. I'm kidding. So Indy goes and gets the book, and they're trying to escape Berlin, and he gets sort of pushed into this. There's a big gathering happening. There's a big old Nazi book burning happening. And as the crowds move around, there's a big shuffle forward. You don't know what for initially, but you realise it's because everyone's trying to move towards Hitler to, I don't know, pat him on the back, shake his hand. I don't know. Does Hitler kiss babies? Is he one of those politicians? I don't remember. I don't know. But everyone's trying to get their moment with Hitler. And that pushes Indiana Jones right into Hitler's arms, but he's wearing a Nazi uniform. And there's a pause, bit of tension. What's he going to do? And then he literally grabs the book, and you think, oh, fuck, he's got the book. And then he pulls out a pen, autographs it, and then gives it back to Indy. And it is
so good.
An astounding moment that both sort of lampoons Hitler, but also works as a really fun moment of brief tension in the film too. It's like a good joke and a moment of, oh shit, is he caught? Is Hitler going to be the outright villain of the movie now? Is Hitler actually going to be fully in the movie? And then you only think that on first watching, obviously, but then when he signs, it's just so good. It's just exactly not what you expect, but also it's exactly right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's fantastic.
It's really good.
Are you ready, Dan, for my 4 words?
Oh yes, please.
Ugh.
I forgot about the
River Phoenix, Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
How amazing are those 2 actors in this movie?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate the material they gave River wasn't my favourite, but we'll come to that.
Yeah, but I love that sequence. The twists, the magic, the fact that we get the reveal and we see the hat and we think maybe that's going to be Indiana Jones, and then you find out that Indiana Jones is the boy. His determination that it should be he says a lot. It should be in a museum. He says that line a lot. But I agree with you. The dialogue isn't amazing, but I just think that sequence and River's performance in it are great.
Do you not think it's really a little? Good. Do you not think it's a little? What's your surname? I don't. What's your family name? I don't have one. Solo. Han Solo.
Yes.
Well, he gets the whip and the hat and the scar all in the one little sequence.
And the fear of snakes. But when he picks up the snake and throws it away, the first snake in the cave with the other scout.
Yeah.
He picks up the snake and he throws it away and he goes, "It's just a snake." My joy of we're going to see how he gets scared of snakes. When that train appears, I'm like, there's a shitload of snakes on that train, I'll tell you that now. I really enjoyed that. It worked. And the thing is, that whole side of Solo, which is obviously what you're referring to, really bugged me. I really didn't like that part of Solo. But I think that's because it was it felt like in Solo they were hooking the entire movie on this and on that. Sorry, and in Solo, who gave a shit? No one was wondering how he fucking was called Han Solo. Whatever. Whereas this is a sequence. It's an intro. It's the intro action set piece sequence. So getting that stuff within that, them choosing to explain a scar that Harrison Ford has.
Yes.
All of that stuff. And it's just fun.
Is.
If you analyse it, I absolutely understand that criticism, but I had a blast with it. And honestly, the moment he picked up that snake and dismissed it, I got so excited.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because so obviously, I we started this podcast with me being like, this is one of my favourite ones of this franchise. I love this movie. I had a really good time watching it, and I made no notes. But obviously, otherwise, if I don't pick apart or at least pull up the stuff that I didn't think worked, this podcast will be just me going, great acting, it's funny, directing, music, it's all there, it's all good. So obviously we're having to sort of look at the moments that I was less sure worked to give us an hour and a half's worth of discussion. So I don't really want to think that any like my nitpicks about. I mean, I don't think it's a nitpick, but my sort of my criticism of like, the way the ending was structured in terms of Indy flip-flopping, and then this scene, or anything to sort of suggest I didn't enjoy this movie. But I really don't like this, and they get away with it, I think, because as you said, it's not like the whole movie is hung on how did Indiana Jones become Indiana Jones, but it just sometimes feels like in the world of movies, characters wake up one morning and they get a little letter through the door that says, today is your origin story, and you're going to do all of the things that will define the rest of your life are happening on this one day. Get ready for a scene that establishes you. And then they go out into the world like, oh, what's going to happen? And then he's like, well, I've got a whip and I got a hat and I'm scared of snakes and I'm Indiana Jones now and I'm going to be that guy.
I must admit, I did watch that sequence and go, how does the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles exist? Because surely this one sequence covered pretty much all of it.
Right. Exactly. I assume it's further adventures from this point onwards. I think they, if I remember rightly from when I went through the trivia, they actually tried to get River to do Young Indiana Jones, but he didn't want to do it. So it was actually Ford that nominated River to play him as a teenager because he'd worked with him before on something called the Mosquito Coast, which I'm actually not familiar with, but maybe I'll check that out. When Phoenix was asked how he played the role, he explained he didn't really base it on Indiana Jones, but on Harrison Ford, who he'd worked with, so he knew quite well. He'd observed Ford out of character before playing the part, and had used that as the basis. The prologue sequence actually inspired George Lucas to spin off into the series, Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which I think came out 3 years later, like 92, 93. Phoenix was, as I mentioned, asked but turned it down because he didn't want to return to television, and that's how Sean Patrick Flannery was cast instead. So that's another bit of trivia I can avoid doing later on. Yeah. But all of that to clarify that, I mean, the best thing about that sequence, for me, while it is one of the weaker bits of the movie, for me, basically that sequence and that flip-flop at the end are my two, like, big, like, didn't 100% work for me. But with that said, from a performance perspective, from an adventure action scene perspective, if you take out those very forced feeling, like, now he's got a whip because he's on a circus car and there's a whip, you take that stuff out, holy hell, that sequence is a good chunk of fun, isn't it? It's just,
yeah, exactly.
It's a young Indiana running around. I certainly preferred it to the opening sequence of the previous movie by quite some way, with my small irks about the sort of forced whip and stuff aside. Like, the actual sequence of events is very, very entertaining. It's performed brilliantly. I think, this is the thing I said I was going to not do for the whole movie earlier, but it all just sort of comes together well. It's like good music, good action. It's got a real sense of adventure, and it has a couple of twists and turns in it that you're probably not expecting, because at this point, an Indiana Jones movie opening kind of feels weirdly safe, because you go, well, Indy shows up, there's an artifact of some sort, he'll get it through some trials, but then the bad guy will end up leaving with it, which, to some degree, that all plays out kind of like that.
Yeah, but what's amazing about this one is we kind of get two openings. Mm-hmm. Like, because we don't spend that much time with Henry and then the guy appearing and taking it back before we slam cut to present day Indy, fucking on a boat that's in a storm, kicking ass.
I'd forgotten about that. I'd entirely forgotten. In my head, the next shot is it's contractually mandated nerd time. Where we try and make Indiana Jones not look cool as shit by giving him glasses and a tweed suit. Sweet jacket. Get in there, nerd. You extremely handsome, clearly quite athletic nerd. Look at them glasses. The reason I pull up that so much is because it just never looks right on Harrison Ford. It never looks believable. He's Harrison Ford. Do you know what I mean? The man's got too much charisma to pull it off. That's all it is. It just doesn't. It never works.
For sure, his muscles are almost popping out of that thing. Yeah. There's a whole swashbuckling boat scene as well.
Yeah, man, this movie's got it all, right?
It's really great. It's really fun. And like you say, the perfect way to watch it is just watch it. No notes, etc. Sean Connery as well.
Yes,
Sean Connery, absolutely pitch perfect casting, fantastic, so much fun. One of my favourite roles of his. I know I only watched a movie this morning, but already one of my favourite roles of his. Just brilliant.
Yeah, it's such an iconic performance. It's really what I know this one for. We started doing this, and I said, I remember Raiders quite well, and I'm much fuzzier on Temple and Last Crusade. The two things I remember Temple sort of ending inside the temple and it being, sort of fire and red and quite dark. And then I remember the bridge sequence, I think, the rope bridge ending. And then the thing I remember from this movie is always, it's the one with Sean Connery. It's the one with Indy's dad. And I don't
think you're alone there. I think that's how most people see this movie, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to how unique a tone that gives this movie, both in all elements, actually. This isn't just tone, it affects the pace of the action, it affects the dynamics, because he's on an adventure with someone he's got a lot of history with, whereas in the previous movie, he was on the adventure with a character that he kind of just met, and the movie before that, Ravenwood, what was her name? Marion? Is it Marion? The female love interest from the first movie?
Yeah.
Marion Ravenwood, right? So in that movie, that was a character I suppose he'd become estranged from, and then was reuniting with. So they were sort of dealing with their history as they went on the adventure. So I guess that is somewhat similar, but it feels, maybe because it's the father-son dynamic, it's just so unique that it really gives this movie a completely distinct vibe. And as I mentioned at the beginning, with Indy sort of traveling with an older guy through the adventure, it sort of puts all the emphasis on Indy in the action scenes, but then they find really clever stuff for Henry to be doing, during those scenes, to be helping. He's not just helpless in a corner going, I guess I'll wait for my son to figure this out. He's struggling for stuff. He's fighting. He's obviously not as capable. He's not leaping off tanks and shooting people and But he's being involved, and he's adding a lot of comic relief too. So it's a really great idea, and not one I think you would have necessarily initially come up with. Pitching an Indiana Jones movie after the first two have come out. I got to imagine that conversation with the studio is going to be quite challenging. So the pitch is it's Indy on an adventure with his father. His father? His father must be at least 20, 30 years older than him, minimum. Yeah. So Indiana Jones is like an elderly man? Yeah. It'll be great. Don't worry about it. That's such a hard sell for a big action adventure movie.
But what we usually do with these movies is we put an attractive woman in there to be potentially the assistant. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, don't worry. We've got an attractive woman for him to sleep with and sort of and banter with in this movie. Oh, fantastic! We've still got that. Okay, brilliant. What's her deal? Oh, she's kind of a Nazi. What?
Yeah, it's amazing how while this movie does fit the formula of an Indiana Jones movie so stringently in many, many ways, particularly the structure, in execution, it's actually really different, really, really different. And how they've achieved that is by sort of shuffling your expectations along in other key areas. Doing something different in other areas, which is really defines this movie. And at the center of that is Sean Connery's performance, which really, really needs to work for this entire thing to work. Because as we've just joked, this on paper could potentially not work. And there's a lot of room for error here, in my opinion. And I think, you get someone as brilliantly charming as Sean Connery to play this role, and it just works. It works really freaking well. We could have the debate about the fact there's only 12 years difference in age between the two men. That's a different discussion.
I didn't.
Sean Connery born in 1930, Harrison Ford born in 1942. Tricky.
I didn't bump up against that in the movie, though, I must say.
No, and this is another thing I can sneak out of the trivia now, because the crew actually had to work really hard to make sure that Sean Connery's beard was white throughout the movie, because I think naturally at the time his beard was not yet white, so they were dyeing it that way to make him appear much older, and his performance required him to be sort of slower and sort of contemplative with his movements. And Harrison had to, be clean shaven to make him appear younger next to him. Because you'll notice it's the first movie he doesn't have stubble. That's just to help him appear younger next to Sean Connery, who again, there's only 12 years difference.
The other thing they do with Connery's character that I really felt watching this was reminiscent of Raiders. In our Raiders review, we talked about how there were barely any moments wasted, which actually I think is one of the things that kind of does excel Raiders. If I was forced to rank to the top of the list, I'd probably, if I was forced. And for me, it's a lot closer than I think it is for you. For me, the gap between these movies is much, much smaller, but I would probably go Raiders, Last Crusade, Temple. But again, the gap between all of those, and ask me on a different day, you may get a different answer.
Yeah.
But one of the things they do in Raiders that we talked about praising so much was there was never a moment with any character wasted. Every moment was serving the plot and serving the character. Mm-hmm. And I think they really do that well with Connery's character. So, for example, it's the moment where he gets hit over the head with that vase. Connery's like, "Oh, it's fake." Like you can tell it's fake, and like that's what he's concentrating on.
Yeah, he's worried. He says it's from like the Ming Dynasty, and at first he's really upset because he's worried they've just destroyed a priceless artifact, and then like he's not because tell you what's missing from your description of that scene that really gives that extra context. This is how he's reunited with his son.
Yeah.
And he's just not at all interested that his son has just appeared after them not seeing each other for years.
But
he's
also
just worried about the vase.
And ignoring the whacking over the head. Like, that's not his problem. That's not what he's concentrating on. Like,
he's worried he's destroyed a priceless artifact, and he keeps worrying about it while he inspects it until he realises it was a fake. Then he's okay with it.
And that's what I mean. That says so much about that character.
Yes,
the moment that Marcus and him and Henry reunite, and it's this absurdly, I guess, British and Scottish like little routine they do with their hands and stuff. Like it just nothing is wasted with. I don't know if you can say that about all the characters. We've drawn attention to the young Indy dialogue not being great, and actually I don't love the fact that Indy and the female character's name, I can't remember her name.
Elsa.
Elsa. I don't love the fact
How could
that
you have
Indy
forgotten her name is Elsa?
Yeah. Let it go.
We did a whole bit about her name being Elsa, Chris. I just feel like...
I really like the snow. I'm going to do that now. My new thing is going to be... I tell you what, every Christmas, I might have talked about this on Nothing But Static. Every Christmas I sing Santa Claus is Coming to Town wrong, and it drives Jess crazy, and it's one of my favourite things to do. So I'll just go, Santa Claus is coming around. She's like, it's not around though, is it? It's to town. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's around. She's like, no, we do this every year. It's to town. I'm like, no, I think you've got it wrong. Anyway,
you are an absolute prick.
I don't love that Elsa and Indy slept together, if I'm honest. So I don't think with Raiders, I think truly there's purpose to everything. I don't think that can be said about every character and beat in this movie.
Well,
but I do think you could say it for Henry, for Sean Connery's portrayal and for that character.
Well,
I'm pretty sure you could.
You brought me onto another small element that I didn't love. I didn't love that they both slept with her.
No.
Oh, and all the jokes relating to it.
Yeah. I would agree.
It's awkward. It's weird. It's unnecessary. it's tonally out of place because it's otherwise a very family-friendly Indiana Jones adventure. I'd say more so than the other two. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a riot. It's a romp.
Yeah, and no one's getting chewed up by airplane propellers or being possessed by with voodoo or whatever.
Well, partly because Pat Roach's scene got cut, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll come to that. But yes. Yeah, I don't know. That it's the one thing that really stands out for me as feeling like it doesn't really belong in this movie. It's a weird joke. It's just so uncomfortable. Yeah. I don't know. There's a few really sus bits of dialogue around it too. No, don't like it. Didn't like it.
The whole how did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how they set it up. But then later on, there's more comments about it. Like when they're on the Zeppelin, I think they talk about it. I didn't like it. No, well, upset me. In fact, it gave me the ick. I didn't like it, and it was unnecessary because, as you said, it just doesn't add anything to anything. It's just like it exists for the jokes, and the jokes aren't great. So then I'm just like, cut it. Do you know what I mean? There's plenty of other great jokes in this movie. You know, the no ticket line remains one of my favorite jokes in any movie of all time. Like, just for those who don't remember the no ticket line, they're on the Zeppelin, and Indy has a big fight with a Nazi guy, then chucks him out the window. But Indy's dressed as a sort of steward on the Zeppelin, and when everyone's looking at him, wondering why he just threw a guy out the window, he's like, "No ticket." As if to say he threw him out for the no ticket, and then everyone suddenly starts like pulling out their tickets to make sure that he sees them, which is a great gag. And the other one that I always like, obviously, is when they're in the plane and Henry is shooting the gun and he ends up shooting their own plane. And then when Indy sees it, he's like, "They got us," which is amazing because the damage was done by himself. It's just objectively very funny. So the movie doesn't need like the jokes about them both sleeping with Elsa because there's plenty of great jokes in it that come naturally. So I don't know. In a world where this script seems to have gone through a lot of changes, I don't know how that joke makes it in. I don't know how that idea that they both slept with this woman runs through the movie. I don't know why that wasn't pulled up and removed at any point. Just even if you say, well, at the time that might not have felt so icky or whatever. Fine, okay, I don't think that's true, but like whatever. Let's assume that's true. It's still not funny. Like you still cut it for not being funny enough, in my opinion. So yeah, it's weird that in a movie so tightly scripted and with so many really great jokes, just constant as well. Like the jokes just seem to never stop, and they're all really good. I've pulled out a couple of my favorites, but like you watch this movie, it'll make you laugh every few minutes. It's really good for that. I just don't know why that's there. Just absolutely. It's not like you go, well, the rest of the movie's kind of dry, so I guess that was them trying to jazz it up with a joke. Like the rest of the movie is very funny. This movie is wet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Jesus, what a weird way of phrasing that.
Well, I was trying to make the joke because I said the movie was dry, so I was thinking, the opposite of dry is technically wet. So
I got it. It's just this podcast has had. Yeah,
Let's move it on.
We've
Chris.
both referred to people as daddy, like you're describing things as wet. There's just, I feel like we are constantly making all the sins that we're criticizing this movie for.
In a minute, I'm going to learn a really valuable lesson because you're going to tell me, and then I'm going to have to tell you to learn that valuable lesson 30 seconds later. So let's talk about the action scenes, Chris, because you asked me this question in the last one. I thought it was a good question. Did you have a favourite action scene? Because there's several set pieces, as with any Indiana Jones movie. Was there any that stood out to you?
Yes. Would you like me to talk about them?
Yes, please. That is generally how this works.
As previously mentioned, I really did like the intro.
Let it go. This podcast has gone on too long.
The perfect part has gone.
I really like this song.
I like the train sequence at the beginning, but we've already talked about that.
Yes.
I just thought that was fun, the magic thing, etc. I like the chase with the car, specifically the scene where the plane goes into the tunnel and then the burning center of the plane. So the bit that's not the wings, the seats, the engines, etc.
Yeah, the fuselage cockpit. I don't know.
Yes, yeah. The fuselage cockpit, etc., is chasing them in the tunnel. I thought that was such a fucking cool visual.
Yeah, it was. That's a really good bit. Yeah, it's a good choice. I don't love the.
What was yours?
I don't love the bit that precedes that. Where they're sort of both in the planes and they're just sort of flying around, bad compositing and being shot at. Because I just didn't feel any real tension or like. But the payoff is so worth it. I'll take a minute or two of not brilliantly executed dogfighting in the air to get them on the ground being chased by a plane. The plane goes into the tunnel and the fuselage just sort of slides through the tunnel. And there's that brilliant moment of comedy, actually, when the two pull up beside each other and they just exchange a look. It's great. So I'm massively with you on that. I think for like whole sequences, because that one kind of suffers for the beginning, I think the tank sequence, the rescue, for those who don't recall, Henry gets sort of taken by the bad guys. Well, actually, he goes to rescue Marcus and ends up just being captured because why the fuck? Why not? So they're in the tank, and Indy's got to get them out of the tank, and it's this really extended sequence. I felt a reasonable amount of tension to it. I thought it had lots of different creative things they did with the tank and its positioning and where Indy is and where the different things that are happening around it as it moves. There were just tons of things I really enjoyed about that I thought it played out in a really interesting way. And to break it up, they keep cutting to what's happening inside the tank. It's not really the most like unique thing that happens in the movie. Like obviously the plane in the tunnel is like I've never seen anything like it. No question, that's like a really unique visual. I guess the tank thing is a bit more standard. It's a bit closer to maybe the car chase from Raiders, in terms of like it's a pretty basic premise, but it's just executed so brilliantly, and it's full of great visual jokes, and so there's like slapstick comedy, but also some really good tension and action in it. I think that's probably my favorite action scene.
I think that's another great choice.
Mm-hmm.
We touched upon earlier, but didn't go into detail about it. So, what's your view on the return of Marcus, the change in character, and actually also shout out the return of Salah as well, which I loved.
Yeah. So I find it tricky because I know why they've done it. I think this is another thing I can snip from my trove. It seems that what happened was when they realised they were bringing in Henry Jones. I said Henry Ford. That would have been a very different person. When they were bringing in Henry Jones, they kind of realised this movie would be teaming up Indy with an older sort of professor type that would be a kind of mentor. And that's the role Marcus Brody, as a character, had played in the previous... in his previous appearance in the first movie. So the problem is, you've kind of got both. And they both fulfill a similar... Based on how we set up Marcus Brody in Raiders, there's too much overlap in those characters. So making Marcus a bit inept, or quite a lot inept, for comic effect, to make him a bit different, is on paper a really good idea. The only problem is it is hard to sort of imagine both characters being the same person. And that is a weird little thing that happens. I guess if you've put a gap between watching Raiders and watching this, you probably wouldn't even really notice. But because we've watched them so close together, it really does stick out that it's very clearly no longer the same character and that you can't really gel them together. I guess the closest you could come to trying to make it make sense if you're fansplaining Marcus is you'd say, well, the thing with Marcus Brody is he's a very good teacher, but once he's out in the field, he's a bumbling idiot because he panics and he gets nervous and he doesn't know what to do.
hence why he didn't want to go the first in Raiders.
Right.
He stayed away in Raiders. So in that sense, yes, I think that is the argument.
But they hurt themselves then with a recurring joke, which is he'd get lost in his own library, which is not an out in the field situation, but in his classroom, just existing situation. And I guess you could also argue we don't see him for a huge amount of the first movie, so, he seemed competent in the few conversations he had with Indy, but actually, if you'd have spent 5 more minutes with him, you'd have seen him tumble down some stairs and drop his documents and, set the Magna Carta on fire or something. I don't know, you know what I mean? He would do something dumb. Maybe just off camera, he was Mr. Beaning all around the place. But I guess that's possible.
Off camera, it was the Netflix TV show Man vs. Bee.
Yeah. Marcus versus Bee, and so and while I would watch Marcus versus Bee, it is just hard to sort of. It's just hard to imagine it's the same person, and it does. It's a pretty minor detraction because I really don't think it's that big of a deal in the long run. And you kind of know why they do it. It is just a bit strange that it feels like such a different person. So yeah, it's a very minor issue, I think, because I think they gain more than they lose doing it, because then they make him distinct from Henry.
Yes, yeah, which does help a lot, I think. Yeah. What did you think of the return of Salah? As excited as me?
Yeah, I thought I'd forgotten that happened until I was watching the movie. Yeah, I think a wonderful choice. Made a bunch of sense. And also not done in a way that if you'd not recently seen Raiders, you'd be confused. It's almost done like he's being introduced, like we've never met him before. They handle it that way. It's pretty good, actually, because it means that you can pretty much watch these 3 movies in any order, I think.
Did you...
don't agree with that?
Yeah. Oh no. I absolutely think you could watch these movies in any order. Yeah. I was just going to say something, and I don't know if I should say it, but I think I've basically given it away now. Did you? I was just going to say it. I googled to confirm the name. Did you know he's back? He's in Dial of Destiny.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great, though. Yes, please.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Then maybe I've spoiled that for people. Hopefully not. But yeah, he's certainly listed as being in it on Le Google. So yeah, that's very exciting.
Well, that is exciting. No, I'm happy. I don't think I've clocked him in any of the trailers. But that, to be fair, I've been the indie trailers have been I'm so excited. I have been watching them, but I'll watch it once. I'll just watch it once. I've seen it.
Fucking remix of Sympathy for the Devil and the theme tune, it's some of the best trailers, because we're reviewing it doesn't seem to be giving away the whole movie, which I love as well. We're reviewing for the NBS we're going to record next from the point of view of when we're recording this, so it will be up by now if you're interested in it. We're reviewing the film Ghosted, and I really made the mistake of watching the trailer for Ghosted. When you've seen Ghosted, Dan, watch the trailer for Ghosted, because it's the entire fucking movie.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, I've been avoiding the trailer because we're watching a few other things on Apple TV at the moment, and the Ghosted trailer keeps playing. I ended up finally catching the last few episodes of Shrinking the other day, and every single episode of Shrinking I watched, which was I think 3, there were 3 left that I'd missed from when we'd reviewed it. Every single one started with a Ghosted trailer. I was like, skip. I'll see the movie. It's fine. It's a movie. I don't need the trailer. And like I said, if it wasn't for just love of Indiana Jones, I wouldn't be too fussed about the indie trailers. I'd be just like, yeah, I'll see it when I see it. I don't care. But because this combination of Indiana Jones and our boy Mangold, in Mangold We Trust.
Yep, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
And Phoebe Waller-Bridge being involved and all that stuff. There's just so many people I respect helping make this movie, and it makes me excited. So I have definitely seen the trailers. And also I've been and seen a few movies recently, and the Indiana Jones trailer is playing in front of absolutely everything. When I went and saw Evil Dead Rise, the Indiana Jones trailer played before it. When I saw Guardians... Volume 3, the Indiana Jones trailer played before it. So I've seen that trailer a couple of times now. Of course,
because given the success, and admittedly there's what's renowned as a bad movie in between these that may put people off, but you've got to assume that people are going, well, look at what Maverick did. Surely this is going to be huge.
Right. They're certainly pushing
And that trailer is phenomenal.
It is a really good trailer. It's a really good trailer. So they've been doing a good job. So I hadn't clocked him in the trailer, but it doesn't mean he's not in it. And I don't think anyone will consider it a major spoiler to say that he seems to be in it. Played brilliantly, John Rhys-Davies. Great job, and it's a fun character, really fun character, and a nice little connective tissue to the world. It's done so subtly, in that they never point out, hey, it's you, the guy from the adventure when we had the Lost Ark. They never, they don't do that. It's just another character in Indy's world that's reoccurred, so that there's a bit of consistency. That there are some people that he works with regularly, and that's it's good, perfect. Good work.
You got any other notes before we?
Well, we haven't talked about the 900-year-old knight. That's the sort of supernatural element to this movie, which is the Holy Grail. The final sequence isn't an action sequence, but everyone picks up a cup, or people try to pick up the cup, guess which one is the Grail. There's like a knight that's been there for hundreds of years. It's arguably the more controversial element of this movie, but it's never bothered me because all these movies end with something weirdly supernatural, and that's pretty light compared to some. I mean, he's living with a cup that, if you drink from it, it like heals you. Like, it's, do you know what I mean? Like, if he knows what the Grail is, which he seems to, presumably the reason he's lived for so long is that he's just drinking water from that every now and then, right? Is that the premise? Is that what what they're implying? I don't know if they outright say that.
Yeah, that was my assumption. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll buy it. Sure. Cup equals eternal life. Fine.
Yeah, like, literally, people's faces have melted off in these movies, and I just don't understand.
There was actual voodoo dolls that worked in the last movie.
Yeah, I do not understand this criticism. There's literally a supernatural element in and I know we're not doing, I've not seen Crystal Skull, but so maybe it's executed differently, but I just don't get it. Like, that's the supernatural is embedded throughout.
I don't think it is. It's executed differently. I've had many criticisms of Crystal Skull. I don't think Crystal Skull is very well executed in a lot of ways, but I've never been bothered by the aliens. Like, Crystal Skulls are alien things. People should have known it was aliens the minute that movie was announced. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
And also, in terms of this, fucking how brilliant is, and I assume it's iconic, is you have chosen poorly.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it is. It's a really iconic moment, and it's a really great sequence. I quite like it. I like the actor that plays the knight, who's Robert Edison. I think he does a really good job. I did have to look up his name. I didn't just know that, for anyone wondering. But he's great. He's great in the movie. I really like him. And I think he does a really good job bringing gravitas to that role. And I like that premise of, like, it's the humble cup. It's the cup of a carpenter. Although I think I read somewhere that it's never actually outright said Jesus is a carpenter in any of the Bible. It's like a presumed because of his dad's career. Like, it's never actually outright stated.
I didn't know that. That makes sense, though.
Yeah, that's just assumed. So, I don't know. Bible canon. We went to Nitpick Corner for the Bible this week. Bible should have clarified. Jesus could have been a cobbler.
Well, hold on. So what are we saying? It never clarified Jesus' job. Still Jesus' father. Oh. It must clarify. Really? It doesn't clarify that he's a carpenter.
Yeah. So
where's that come from then? Because everyone thinks of him as a carpenter.
Yeah, exactly. So here we go. So in the scene where Indy chooses which cup is the Grail, he picks up the right one by saying, that's the cup of a carpenter. The Bible never outright says that Jesus was a carpenter, but since his earthly father, Joseph, was, in that culture, Jesus would have probably been raised learning the trade. Interestingly, as a struggling actor, Harrison Ford used a book on carpentry from the library to start doing odd jobs to earn a living. And one of those jobs was actually working on George Lucas's house. I didn't include that piece of trivia in my official trivia, but because we were talking about it, I remembered reading it. So there you go.
Well, who knew that?
Yeah.
Well, you did after the trivia, but still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There you go. Wow. Okay.
What do we think about the villain? The last major point is that we haven't talked about Donovan, played by Julian Glover, who's kind of the villain of this piece. He starts as he's the guy that sends Indy on the adventure. You think he's sort of got good intentions, but hasn't. He's greedy bad guy working with Nazis. He's kind of reminiscent, to draw another line to Raiders, of oh god, what was the villain called in Raiders again? This is just the early morning killing me now. He's like literally a famous character. What the hell's the character's name?
I can't remember. Sorry.
Belloc. Who's like who's also like hunting for treasure, but has teamed up with the Nazis to make it happen. Yeah, and I think
I think it's the least memorable of all the villains, but
Yes.
that didn't harm the movie for me. I got so much other good stuff from the movie, all the things we've just talked about. The villain being not particularly memorable didn't bother me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And
I think there probably was some room.
There's complexity with her character as well, as we've already talked about, which she's kind of the villain too. So.
Right, yeah, I think I think Elsa kind of makes up for it to some degree, and then I think for anyone who, because I 100% agree with that. I do think the fact we're talking about him basically last is because it's just there's nothing really to say about him. He's not particularly intriguing or engaging as a villain. I think that you sort of go, he's there. He's there to be the guy that twirls his mustache and goes, I'm going to get it before you, Dr. Jones, to put it sort of like, just to give someone him front to face off. Considering they went to a lot of effort to differentiate the rest of the characters in this movie from characters that have been in the previous movies, he's surprisingly generic. But because the rest of the movie is so fun and interesting, it doesn't really hurt it. It's just a small element. So I agree. He's one note basically. That's the problem with Donovan Donovan as a character. He's just there to get the Grail. That's it. That's his deal. Willing to work with Nazis for it. They don't even really explore that in the way they did, because at least with Belloc, he had all of his doubts because the Nazis were doing nasty things, and there were scenes where he was like regretting his choices. When they were like torturing Marion. Belloc was trying to keep her safe. So like Belloc was a lot more complex. So this is poor man's Belloc. Not in performance. I'm not throwing shade at Julian Glover, who played Donovan, but I just mean like as on paper, Donovan's a pretty boring one-note villain.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
Although I don't mind the idea of him like showing up and being the guy that sends Indy on the quest, so you assume he's a good guy, and then it turns out he sent Indy on the quest because he's doing a Belloc. He's letting Indy go find the thing to steal it from Indy.
Yeah, that's quite a nice twist, isn't it?
Yeah, but that doesn't really do anything for his character. That's more of a plot point. Cool. Yeah. So I think overall, this movie sort of puts like fun, comedy, adventure over like action and tension, which is what the second one did. So the result, I think, is more an enjoyable watch. But then the action scenes suffer in turn. I think the original film wins on just having a better balance overall. One movie's on the right side of the spectrum, the other movie's on the left side of the spectrum in terms of, Temple and Crusade, but then Raiders sits firmly in the middle, and gets to benefit from both, I think. So yeah, on the whole, really, really good. I think this trilogy does really hold up, and I think... I think anyone interested in checking these out before Dial of Destiny comes out should do so with no hesitation. There's no there's no element of these particularly aging badly in their entertainment value. There's some aging badly in terms of some light misogyny and racism, particularly for the second one, but otherwise I think they age pretty well. And I've really enjoyed rewatching them.
I agree. I think fun romp is the perfect way to describe this movie in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a blast. I think you could just have so much fun with it, and it's so funny, and it's like I say, it feels like a a modern movie, and better than a lot of those. We've had a lot of shit quippy movies recently. I agree. I echo your thoughts. I was thinking the other day. I was trying to work out whether this was the most consistent trilogy we've done. Because obviously Star Wars is such a high bar on Empire and A New Hope that I was like, is this as a trilogy more consistent, even if it's not necessarily...
Because Jedi is the weakest, like clearly the weakest of the three, with a pretty noticeable gap. Whereas, as you said, these are all really close to each other.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that the other day, and I couldn't really come to a conclusion because I think you really can make an argument that Return of the Jedi is still brilliant. Like,
yes.
So I think the best trilogy we've done is still Star Wars, but it's certainly, I think this is, I would say probably what else have we done? Oh yeah. Back to the Future is a problem. Not for consistency. This is a more consistent trilogy than Back to the Future by a long way.
Yeah.
But we're getting into favourites.
Matrix.
Then, aren't we?
Matrix. Yeah, that's not consistent. Lord of the Rings. Oh, Lord of the Rings is pretty consistent.
That's true. Lord of the Rings is very consistent.
The Santa Claus trilogy not consistent, so we don't have to worry about that. That's not on the list.
Santa Claus trilogy is. Yeah, Santa Claus. Is Santa Claus less consistent than The Matrix? Yes, I would say it probably is. There's some saving graces in Reloaded, probably more so than... Oh, but then again, does that make it more consistent if two are similar? Who knows? Anyway, it was just something I was thinking. Lord of the Rings is it, actually. Lord of the Rings, there truly isn't much between those movies.
Yeah, I couldn't pick a Lord of the Rings, so they're almost like they're one movie. They just feel like one continuous. Yeah. Man, that's crazy though. How consistent the three trilogies we've done now. Well, that's got to change because I mean, looking at trilogies we could do in the future, the Mummy franchise, Jurassic Park, the Nolan Batman films, the prequels for Star Wars,
Spider-Man.
Yeah, the Spider-Man trilogy, which famously the third one, the X-Men trilogy, famously the third one. Like, if you look at like trilogies that are like on our radar to do in future seasons, we've really been going for the top tier ones because I think Indy, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars, like those three trilogies are all really, really, really good.
Yeah, and renowned as well. Is there another? Do you know? Because
and Back to the Future, like
list.
Christ. Yeah.
I suppose the one. I know. Part 2 gets a lot of flack. I think it's part 2, but the one renowned trilogy we've not yet done, maybe you could argue, is The Godfather.
Yes, but part 3 is often shat on from a great height.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is it part 3 that's shat on, not part 2? Yes. Right, part 3. I didn't know which part. I've never seen it actually because I didn't know which part.
Because I think the first two made by the same person with quick succession. The third one was a few years later and made by someone else, and I think that's yes,
right.
Well, I think The Godfather 3. I think, and it's been a long, long time since I've seen The Godfather. So if I'm misremembering or whatever, you feel free to. I always feel like the third one shouldn't have been called 3. I feel like it should have been called like Epilogue or Coda, or like it should have just something because it's not really part 3. The story is told by part 2, and then it's just like there's another movie that's sort of like it's almost like an epilogue. It's. Yeah, hard to explain in words, but we'll cover it at some point. I've added it to the list, and we haven't even talked. They've got the Alien movies as well. That's another one we've not touched yet.
Is that really a trilogy though? That's more a quadrilogy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that about Indiana Jones though, but we've ignored it in the last one. So
yeah, but I think it's harder. I think because these three all came out really close together. They're all
Well, that was true with the Alien movies, wasn't it? And then there was a big gap before the fourth one.
Oh, was it? I thought fourth was quite close to it.
I could be misremembering. Shall I quickly look up the Alien franchise film series? Let's see. Has this got like just a list of the movies with the dates? That would be handy. Yeah, here we go. So 79, 87, 92 and 97. None of those are close to each other. There was a big gap between almost all of those.
Turns out none. By the way, I've just done a quick Google and completely wrong. There's loads of iconic trilogies we've not done. Obviously I don't know if we necessarily do these because I don't know if you've seen them. I haven't. But there's the whole Before Midnight, Before Sunrise thing.
Of course, yes.
The Cornetto trilogy is probably the big one. War of the Planet of the Apes. The Evil Dead is obviously a big one for you.
Yes.
Toy Story we're doing as we go. But yeah, no, we got plenty of trilogies to mine.
Mm-hmm.
Pirates of the Caribbean was a big one from our childhood in terms of nostalgia.
Right. I'm writing these down, by the way. I'm literally typing as you're talking. I'm just, Because, the Evil Dead trilogy, the Cornetto trilogy, the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, this is gold, mate. What, you got any others?
Well, the ones we mentioned earlier, Spider-Man.
Yeah, I've written those down. The Mummy, Jurassic Park. The Mummy one's going to be fun because I love that first movie, and the drop in quality from that first movie from memory is astounding. It is something to behold. Even as a kid, and I loved fucking everything. You know what I mean? This is, when you're a kid, you just watch, you just don't care, right? I thought Space Jam was incredible. The Rugrats movie I thought was one of the best movies I ever saw. Even as a kid, I recognised immediately The Mummy 2 was shit. Immediately.
I know it's a bit more modern as well, but I have nostalgia for, and I think it would be fascinating to watch the Hangover trilogy as well.
I don't think I've ever seen the sequels.
What we could do for the second one is just re-upload our review of the first one. That's a joke.
I figured out the other day. I don't know if we talked about this. I still remember all the lyrics to Stu's song, top to bottom.
Have you really never seen the second one?
No.
Most people have seen the second one. The second one is the first. Oh, then we have to do it at some point then, just for the experience of you watching those.
Yeah, because I think that's what happened. I think everyone just said it's the first one again. I went, all right, I don't need to see it then. And then the third one came out, and I went, well, I've seen the second one. And then I was like, because people didn't go crazy for the third one, so I was just like, I guess I don't need to bother. But yeah, I still remember Stu's song top to bottom. I jokingly started singing it the other day. And finished it, and couldn't believe the lyrics were in my brain.
Well, give us a blast now.
Well, it's not a very long song. I could probably do the whole song. So it's what do tigers dream of when they take a little tiger snooze? Do they dream of mauling zebras or Halle Berry in her Catwoman suit? Don't you worry, you little strappy head. We're gonna get you back to Tyson and your cozy tiger bed. And then we're gonna find our best friend Doug, and then we're gonna give him a best friend hug. Doug, 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 Dougie, Dougie, Doug, Doug. And if we get murdered by crystal meth tweakers, well then we're shit out of luck.
Nice. Very
and
nice.
That is just that is literally never left my brain. And I don't know how or why.
And I imagine you've not particularly rewatched The Hangover much.
I don't think I've seen it since. I genuinely don't think I've seen it since. I think I saw the first one once. And for some reason, I can do that song top to bottom.
There we go.
Weird, right?
Go. Shall we triv it up?
I'm going to give you some trivia. There's put a little bit of emphasis on that one. So,
I liked it. It was good.
This is the only Indiana Jones film in the series that does not have the word "of" in the title. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only one. Even now with Valor Destiny.
What is it? Crystal Skull, though? Isn't it Crystal Skull?
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Oh, well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
The only one. Only one.
Great trip.
So, thank you for IMDb for pointing that out. When George Lucas met Spielberg to discuss the third Indiana Jones movie, George Lucas wanted to have it set inside of a haunted mansion, but Spielberg had just finished Poltergeist and decided he wanted to do something different to that. So then Lucas pitched the Holy Grail. And then it was Spielberg that added the sort of father-son sub-story. That makes sense to me. I think Spielberg does often come back to family as a thread in a lot of his movies. So it does not surprise me in the slightest that Spielberg went family and Lucas went Holy Grail. Yes, that makes sense to me.
I have to say, though, Indiana Jones in a haunted mansion is a great pitch for a film.
Right, 100% agreed. It's the problem is, and I think this is what we covered right at the beginning, if you're Lucas and Spielberg and you've just done Temple of Doom and you kind of want to reset to sort of baseline Indiana Jones on a globe-trotting adventure, you kind of can't do it. Haunted Mansion is the movie you follow up this with. Because if you do sort of like a standard one, a weird one, a standard one, a weird one, that's how you would do it. But I agree with you, though. Just in principle, in theory, it's a fun idea, for sure.
And not with the gap either. Kingdom of Crystal Skull or Dial of Destiny couldn't have been that.
Right, yes.
There's too big a gap.
Yes.
You need to go home and do the nostalgia with the size of both gaps.
Yep. It's like a palate cleanser. This is what Indiana Jones is. Now we can do something weird with it. Yep. No, agreed. Actually, on that thought, I wanted to very quickly ask you something I meant to bring up earlier. In the previous movie, you sort of praised that it was sort of one sequence of events that flowed into it, and it meant they were in one place for the whole movie. This movie is a bit more globe-trotting. Several different countries visited. Bother you, or just kind of like, it's a shame? Because how did you feel about it? Like, were you just like disappointing, annoying?
No, because Temple's the palate cleanser. You get back to what you love, and it didn't do that. It's not globe-trotting pointlessly or needlessly like a lot of modern movies are. So yeah, that didn't bother me at all.
Great.
Good. Not every film can be Mad Max Fury Road,
True. That's very true. Oh god, I love that movie. Well, the original Mad Max trilogy is a fascinating one to cover as well, actually, because let me tell you, that is another one with wildly inconsistent quality. And I'm gonna tell you right now, the first one isn't great.
Yeah, just in general, I don't know why we don't do more movies with Tina Turner in.
Good point. Thunderdome, baby. Let's do Thunderdome. Right.
I can't actually name another movie that Tina Turner's been in, can you?
The Bodyguard?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Was that
right.
wait, was that Tina Turner? Am I getting confused?
Was that Tina Turner or Whitney Houston?
Christ, that might have been Whitney Houston.
Let's look it up.
I'm looking it up. Thank you for doing that in the trivia voice there. The Bodyguard, 1992 film.
Yeah, it's
That was Whitney Houston. Oh, well. There you go. Just film with singer. Right. So after having a great working relationship with Spielberg on Gremlins, Spielberg produced the next two movies that Chris Columbus scripted, The Goonies, and that was based on a Spielberg idea, and Young Sherlock Holmes, which was one of Columbus's ideas. Spielberg had then wanted Columbus to come on board to script this movie, which would have been a big step up for him as a writer. He initially accepted and went to meet Spielberg and Lucas. He was intimidated by them, being such titans of industry. Even though he'd worked with Spielberg a few times, these are basically his cinematic heroes. So he ended up acting as Spielberg and Lucas's sort of secretary on this movie for like 5 days. Like, he took down all the notes and ideas. Basically, Lucas dictated the screenplay to Columbus. And Columbus was very fearful of making any changes to it and went against his own instincts, basically. He felt the script was lifeless, without energy, and there was sort of nothing of him in it. So he turned in the script once he'd sort of transcribed it as Lucas had dictated it, and was then fired from the project for all of the things he thought about the project. That it was lifeless and didn't have energy or anything like that. So it was a bit of a defining moment for Columbus, because he said never again did he ignore his instincts on a movie, or was intimidated by people he worked with.
Yeah, that all sounds a bit rough, doesn't it?
Yeah, I feel for him. I feel for him.
Me too.
Bit brutal, that. As we've already said, but it's here in the trivia, so I'm gonna read it because I'm basically Ron Burgundy with the teleprompter. Harrison Ford cut his chin in a car accident in Southern California when he was about 20 years old. So in the movie, they explain Indy having that cut on his chin by having young Indiana Jones accidentally cut his own chin with a whip. A whoopah, as Chandler
Great
would say.
attention to detail that, and just the notion of that's the first time he's using the whip. He's not skilled at it yet. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I was happy about that. I'm glad he didn't just pick it up and immediately start like wielding it like an expert. That would have been that would have been very frustrating. As with the other Indiana Jones movies, Harrison Ford did many of his own stunts. According to legendary stuntman Vic Armstrong, he had to pull Ford aside and ask him to let him do some of the work because Ford was doing so much of the action himself. Armstrong has later said, if he wasn't such a great actor, he'd have made a great stuntman.
Wow, fair play.
Yeah, I like that about Ford because he was, he wasn't necessarily like a young man at this point, was he? He was
not at all.
So when was he born? He was born like 42. What year was this? This is like 80 something. Yeah, he's in his 40s, heading towards his 50s. He's spry.
Yeah, fair play.
Sir Sean Connery was always Steven Spielberg's first choice to play Indiana Jones' father, as an inside joke to say that James Bond is the father of Indiana Jones, which is a wonderful gag because we've talked about a lot the links between Bond and Jones in the previous podcasts. Listen to those for more details on how the two characters how Bond kind of influenced Indiana Jones. If they'd failed to acquire Sean Connery, which was Spielberg's first choice, Gregory Peck and John Pertwee were the backup choices for the role. John
Pertwee would have been great.
Yeah, that's my I'm intrigued by sort of option. I'm glad we got what we got because we already talked about Connery gives such a brilliant, warm, but also cold equally. It's such a hard performance he's doing. Because he's like so weirdly warm when he talks to people, but at the same time, he's been so distant with his son. It's a very interesting tightrope walk that he does, and he does a really good job. So I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, Pertwee is a really inspired choice also.
Partly because I get a real kick out of it was either his dad was going to be. I've just looked. Gregory Peck seems to be a very iconic actor, but doesn't have a particular role. But I love the idea of if it wasn't James Bond, it might have been Doctor Who was his dad.
Yeah. And actually, wait. So how? And that's the other question. Actually, John Pertwee born. When was he born? Yeah, see, he was born in 1919. So John Pertwee would have been of an age to have had a son at Harrison Ford's / Indiana Jones's age. So it also would have been slightly more age appropriate. But, can't have it all. Like I said, no. I wouldn't change it. But Pertwee's an interesting choice. I like Pertwee. For those who don't, for those who are not aware, the Doctor in Doctor Who for quite some time. Third Doctor. Son of Sean Pertwee, famous actor also.
Father of Sean Pertwee.
What did I say?
Son of Sean Pertwee.
No, I'm sticking with it.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, do I be that guy? And then I'm like, I think Dan would point that out for me in a kind of just in case anyone's screaming it.
No, I'm standing by it. Son of Sean Pertwee.
Fair enough.
Sean Pertwee, born in the 1800s. Anyway, Indy and his father discovered that they both slept with the same woman. In fact, Harrison Ford and Sean Connery have actually shared 3 on-screen love interests. So someone's been the love interest for these characters in multiple movies. So actually, weirdly, Kate Capshaw, the female lead from the previous movie, appeared in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, was also played Sean Connery's wife in Just Cause. And then 1 year after this, Sean Connery appeared in The Russia House with Michelle Pfeiffer, who'd played Ford's wife in What Lies Beneath. So yeah, there you go. Happened multiple times. Laurence Olivier was originally considered to play the Grail Knight. Legendary actor Laurence Olivier, but unfortunately at this time he was too ill to commit to the role and actually ended up passing away shortly after the movie's release.
That would have been amazing. Yeah, that would have been phenomenal, wouldn't it? The guy who does it does a great job, but to see Laurence Olivier do that part would have been quite something, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's a shame that he was not well enough.
Amanda Redman was asked to play the female lead of Elsa, but turned it down because of her real-life fear of rats. Fair.
Yeah, this if we've learnt anything from the Triv sections for these movies, the producers are quite fast and loose with, but they'd have covered her in rats.
Chris, you're not wrong. 2,000 rats were bred for this production. Breeding them specifically was necessary because if you'd have just gotten ordinary rats, they could have been diseased. So you had to actually breed the rats for the movie and keep them enclosed and clean. We didn't really talk about Alison Doody, the actress who played Elsa. She did a wonderful job. I wouldn't have changed her for anyone.
She was great.
It's a shame that we didn't get a chance to. We talked. I think because the character is so interesting, the inclination is to talk about the writing. But she performs her brilliantly and brings a lot of subtlety to the role. She doesn't give away the twist by being a bit too mustache twirly in the first half, but at the same time you watch it back knowing that she turns out to be a Nazi. There's something about her tone. She does a really good job selling both sides of that character and not giving the game away. So hats off, hats tipped, whatever the word is for Alison Doody. She does a great job.
Doff your cap, I think.
And
they do a really good job of that with the writing as well. Like the notion of you think back at the scenes of the rooms being ransacked, and you know that potentially she did that, and you go, well, yeah, that they made all that mess, and you think back to it, and you're like, why didn't I spot that it was fucking weird that loud music stopped her from noticing?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's really, really, really well plotted.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Most of the uniforms worn by the Nazis in Berlin book-burning sequence are actually authentic World War II Nazi uniforms, not replicas. Apparently, a cache of old uniforms was discovered in Germany and obtained by costume designer Anthony Powell to be used in this movie. Those were real Nazi uniforms, Chris.
Jeez, that is kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I assume, found in storage these are the uniforms we will distribute, and they didn't get to. Not worn for murder. I'm going to assume these were unused. But it just makes me laugh because you forget that they would need to have had it's just one of those weird things. Like the Nazis probably had uniform storerooms and a guy that's job it was to wash old uniforms. Just you know what I mean? It's you don't think about that stuff. But yeah, that was someone's job, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever. I'm just looking it up now. No, so I don't think it was ever. I don't know. It was obviously never released, but I'm pretty sure Lee Evans was working on a project about Hitler's weatherman, and the notion of he needed a weatherman to tell him about what was coming up weather-wise, so they could plot what they were going to do. And that notion of who that person was and what doing that meant and all that sort of stuff, which is it's similar vein, fascinating idea, but
because you just don't think about the sort of mundanities around that. Do you know what I mean? Just funny that they had a whole laundry service going on to keep the uniforms clean and in order and stuff. Probably not basically an army's worth of men just sorting out the laundry. So Connery and Harrison Ford. Chris, you get. Let me tell you, I didn't love the trivia for this one. There's there's not much. There's only a handful left already. Seven. There's 6 or 7 left, which is, at this point we'd usually have more because there was just so much trivia about alternate scripts that were just and then Indiana Jones went here. And then he went there, and there aren't any notable differences. If anyone wants to go to the IMDb trivia page for this thing and read some of the alternate potentials for this story, do it. But it was mostly just swapping out places and MacGuffins. They weren't significantly different in a way that affected character or story beats. So I didn't really care for this trivia. But this piece of trivia, Chris, almost makes it worth it. Sean Connery and Harrison Ford were not wearing trousers during the sequence on the Zeppelin. It was filmed in a very hot studio, and Connery didn't want to sweat too much, so opted to take off his trousers. Ford followed.
Phenomenal. one of my favourite pieces of trivia we've ever done.
Just thinking about that scene now, knowing they're not wearing trousers, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Such
Makes me want to rewatch the whole movie.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. For these scenes at the Nazi rally in Berlin, where Indiana confronts Elsa and steals back the diary, Spielberg had all of the extras who did the Nazi salute simultaneously put their other arm behind their back and cross their fingers. I think that's good.
Yeah, that seems good.
I like that. A little FU to the Nazis. I love it. Love it. Anthony Powell found it a challenge to create Sean Connery's costume because the script required the character to wear that same costume throughout the entire movie and therefore all the set pieces. Powell thought about his own grandfather and incorporated tweed suits and fishing hats. Powell felt it necessary for Henry to wear glasses but didn't want to hide Connery's eyes, so chose rimless ones, but initially couldn't find any that were suitable, so he had to have them specially made. It's a good costume.
Yeah, no, it's a very good costume.
Mm-hmm. So
he looks and feels like Indiana Jones's dad, which is, what you want given the part he's playing.
Yes. To make him look like someone else's dad would probably be a mistake.
Yeah, I think so.
He could look like John Pertwee's dad.
Sean Pertwee?
Yeah, make him look like Sean Pertwee. Famous father of John Pertwee.
That 7 hours sleep between us is kicking in, baby.
There it is, boy. Whoop, whoop. All right. So the character who is credited as just Fedora credited in the credits. Oh my god, who's played by Richard Young. He was originally named in the script Abner Ravenwood, which would have made him Marion's father and Indiana's eventual mentor, the one that had passed away recently at the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That is good. That is an alternative I actually wish, because I don't really know why they would cut that. It's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Is it because he's... Well, I guess you'd make him more French, I suppose. If you stuck to that idea, you maybe hire a slightly different actor. But yeah, I can't. Yeah, I'm a little mixed on it because I can't. Like you, can't really think of a reason not to do it. Other than that, maybe it's a bit much, because obviously I already talked about the fact there's a little too much Indy discovering his entire life purpose in one day, his entire identity in one day. Also meeting his future mentor that day might have been a...
You could almost do it, but not make too much of it. And also, would you then spend the movie expecting her to show up, I suppose?
Yes. Plus, as well, is it not a bit weird if that's her dad and he wears a leather jacket and a hat and goes around, if she then is attracted to Indy, who is basically become her father, that's also then...
Especially with the age difference between them already being a bit...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Leave it. Best left alone.
Cool. Tom Stoppard was paid. This is one of those things. This trivia is massively interesting, but I'm doing it to give credit to a man who does not get credit, did not receive a credit for this movie, and clearly worked very hard on it, and was a big part of, I think, why this works. So Tom Stoppard was paid. He was paid reasonably $120,000, which is quite a chunk of change, to rewrite the dialogue for the movie. Specifically lines for Henry and Indiana in their exchanges. After the movie's release and subsequent success, he was paid another $1 million as a bonus. In The Last Crusade in Oral History, an article published in Empire magazine in 2006, Spielberg said about the junior and senior conversations, "It was an emotional story, but I didn't want to get sentimental. Their disconnection from each other was the basis for a lot of comedy, and I gave it to Tom Stoppard, who went uncredited, a lot to write." And it gave Tom Stoppard, who was uncredited, a lot to write. I rephrased that sentence, sorry. Tom is pretty much responsible for every line of dialogue. Imagine being responsible for all of the dialogue in fucking Last Crusade and not getting a credit. Now, £1 million as a bonus, plus the initial $120,000, dollars, and the initial $120,000 as pay is a pretty good compensation for that, for the work. But still, why isn't he credited?
Yeah, that's mad. That's real mad.
I'm glad that Spielberg has at least spoken about his work since, so that we know that. But I put this in the trivia mostly to give him a shout out. Well done.
I will also, this isn't triv, but a shout out that we haven't probably done enough over these 3 episodes. So it's kind of the last chance to do it now. The music in all 3 of these movies is obviously outstanding. I think one of the reasons we've not really zeroed in on it is because, well, of course, it's stunning and fantastic. I think we did talk about it in Raiders, to be fair, but just to reiterate again, the music's incredible.
Yeah, the music's incredible through all these movies. John Williams did a wonderful job, and I think this is the same thing that happened with when we did Lord of the Rings films. It's like so good, you almost forget to go, wait, oh, sorry, yeah, the music is like some of the best in cinema history, by the way. Obviously, like, people know this. It's like almost an established fact. It's so universally praised that you kind of go, well, yeah, of course. But yeah, 100%. John Williams does a wonderful job on the score for these movies. So yeah, as hinted at by Chris earlier, Harrison Ford and Pat Roach, who are the only actors to appear in all 3 of these movies. Roach played the sort of Sherpa and mechanic characters in the Raiders Lost Ark, and the mechanic one had obviously the big fight with Indy, and then the chief guard in Temple of Doom also had a big fight with Indy. There was another scene filmed for this movie where Indiana Jones sort of knocks him unconscious aboard the Zeppelin. They have a bit of a fight to extend sort of this weird running joke of Ford's character knocking down Roach's characters in every movie. However, the scene was not used in the final film. So basically, the only appearance of Roach that remains in the movie is the shot of him running behind Vogel towards the Zeppelin from above that you see. And sadly, this is the last movie in the franchise Roach appears in. He passed away in 2004. So yeah, that's a shame. That's a real shame.
Yeah, that's a massive shame. We talked about how good he is in Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. He's great in these movies as well, and without a doubt, gone too soon.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and obviously in these movies, he's just playing the heavy. It's certainly not his most complex role.
No, but still great though.
But he's exactly. But he sells it really, really well. If you are intrigued in why we keep bringing up this actor in every single one of these, even though he has such small parts in these movies, it comes from a love of that actor from his other work. So check out Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, and just marvel at how good he is at emoting and bringing warmth to a character that you might find visually looks intimidating.
And how much he did with also relatively little, actually. Like Bomber's got a brilliant episode in series 1 and a good plot, an interesting plot in series 3. But there are some seasons of that show where they definitely don't know what to do with that character, and you kind of feel like, I think the real tragedy of the loss of Pat Roach in a way is that he clearly, I don't know if we always saw glimpses and moments of just how incredible he could be, as opposed to that being front and center, except maybe within his wrestling career, which we don't know as much about. But yeah, big love to Pat Roach and the memory of Pat Roach.
Yeah, absolute legend, wonderful human by all accounts, and a very good actor. So in the scene where Dr. Schneider hands Donovan the incorrect Holy Grail, as Chris hinted at earlier, if you pay attention to her just after she hands him the cup, she very subtly looks over to Indiana Jones and shakes her head, signalling that she'd purposefully given Donovan the wrong cup. Nice moment, pretty subtle. The movie doesn't hang too much of a hat on it. I like it. So, it is time, Chris, for Cars Exist. So, there's a huge number of cars used in this movie, various chase scenes and people driving around all sorts of places. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on the full list, but a couple of note. The bike with sidecar used for the escape is a 1988 Dnepr. I've never heard of this. MT-11. So congratulations, bike manufacturer. Your car/bike made it into Indiana Jones. Yes, thank you for the warning. My battery is running low. I'm aware. For the villains' cars, Michael Lantery, I guess, worked on the movie, selected the 1914 Ford Model T and a 1919 Ford Model T truck, and then a 1916 Saxon Model 14, fitting each with a Ford 2.8-litre V6 engine, and sacks of dust hung under the cars to create a dustier environment. So there's lots of Ford Model Ts in the movie. I noticed that when I looked. Fancy cars. The fancy car that ends up being given to the Sultan is a 1935 Rolls-Royce 20/25 HP. And then finally, Alexei Sayle, who plays the car enthusiast Sultan, is actually a car enthusiast in real life and has written for car magazines and the motoring section of the Telegraph. So that's oddly apt.
I did not realise that was Alexei Sayle, did you?
I'm not sure I know who Alexei Sayle is, if I'm being honest with you.
He's a British actor, I think. He's been in a bunch of stuff. The Young Ones. You'd probably, if you Google him.
Oh yeah.
But you'd recognise him.
I do recognise him when I Google him. But yeah, okay. I didn't clock him in this movie, but yeah, I do know that face.
Yeah. No, I didn't realise he was in this.
Although on his IMDb, it literally says known for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It's like the first thing it says.
Oh, I think he'd be more known for The Young Ones, at least in the UK, maybe.
Yeah, interesting. I never know how that works, though, on IMDb, because it feels like it's automated, known for. Then maybe they just look at what's the most popular movie financially, maybe?
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Yeah. What I didn't do, though, with this week, Chris? I didn't look up the box office for this movie. I usually say the box office. I didn't bother this week. I'm going to quickly pull that up. Any final thoughts while I'm doing that?
No, just that I think there's just such fun action adventure movies, and I think it's just especially if you've got nostalgia for them, if you've never checked them out, fucking lazy Sunday afternoon, chuck one on. You'll have a great time.
It's such a great Sunday afternoon movie. I don't know how to explain what that means, but it really is. Yeah,
but it really truly is. It's I genuinely often when it's movies I've not seen. There's a degree of let's watch this and let's see how we feel about it. I genuinely looked forward to watching these movies each time. So, really got me pumped for the new one. I'm really pleased we did it.
Do you sort of have a weird I kind of wish I'd sort of seen these when I was younger? Giving them more of the time. Do you ever have those little weird? Because when we do this, we sometimes watch movies that one of us watched as a kid, but the other one didn't. I think is this the closest you've ever had to being a bit regretful you didn't give the movie more time?
Oddly, I don't think so, because how I talked in my Star Wars review about how when I first watched Star Wars, I found it a little bit too dense for me, a little bit too. It felt slow as a kid and all that sort of stuff. I think I would have. If I'd have watched it too young, I'd have said that about this. Which is weird because you could apply just the same logic to Back to the Future. But I remember the first time watching Back to the Future, my dad being like, "You have to concentrate on this film and you have to sit and watch it." And I did, and by the end of the movie, I was absolutely wrapped up and enthralled in it. So maybe if I'd have just fucking concentrated harder on Star Wars and this, if I had have watched it. But thinking about the fact that I watched it for media studies and was just like, yeah, all right. I think I appreciate it more now than I would have, to be honest.
Yes, that's fair, and probably about right. So now this podcast has just pipped over the length of the movie. It's probably time we start wrapping up, but before we do, very quickly, so the budget on this movie was only $48 million, and you're wondering, that's just a lot of money, Dan. Well, it is, but it made $474 million in the box office. Jeez. So all three of these movies were massive hits, Christ.
And obviously, I don't know if there was anything in the trivia of this, but it was called The Last Crusade. Presumably, it was absolutely intended to be the last movie at the time, yeah?
Well, it's hard to say, because obviously The Last Crusade really, the Crusades were a thing that happened, historically, looking for the Holy Grail, I guess, and other things. Is it the title is always a bit like, I've always wondered, is it double meaning? Does it mean it's Indy's last outing? They make a couple of references to him being a bit older in this one, which I think is so weird considering that he's still playing this role now. They're already making jokes about him being old. I'm like, Jesus, wait till you get to the next one. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's quite funny. There's a couple of gags early on about that, and so yeah, I do think it's potentially double meaning. Like, it's supposed to be one of Indy's last adventures, but also, or at least from Spielberg's perspective, it felt like he really didn't want to do any more after this. He'd kind of made a 3-movie commitment, but I guess maybe they imagined if the franchise would keep going, but with other directors, maybe, kind of like a James Bond situation. But it never really happened for whatever reason, which it is crazy to think, because when you look at the gross, and even Crystal Skull, I've just had a look, budget of 185 million, worldwide box office of 790. Like,
jeez, wow, that's crazy.
Do you know what I mean? It's hard to deny that these movies have all been a massive financial success every single time. So yeah, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with Dial of Destiny. I'm hoping not a flop, because
I think
the film looks great. I think the film looks great.
I think it's going to be huge, and I think unless I'm getting this the wrong way around, I hope I don't curse it, because I think I'm due. Was it with you? I'm pretty sure we debated Maverick, and I was like, it's going to be massive, and you were like, nah, it's not.
Yeah, it was before it was like quite ahead of its release, and I remember sometimes you get these things wrong, and we were talking about what would be the biggest movie of the summer, and I got it completely wrong. And
I think I said Maverick, and you were like, no, and I was like, I don't know, man. So I fear saying that I think this movie's going to be huge, because I don't want it to be my turn to get it wrong. But I do think this movie will be big.
I hope so. Because I like Mangold, and I like Indy. So yeah, that's everything in terms of this movie. Where are we going? So we've each got a movie left. We've got one choice left. Technically, this was my choice. Although when we do a trilogy, it's kind of a loose. Like we kind of have agreed we're doing that trilogy. So once we've started that, it's just happening. So what are we doing? Where are we going? You've got one choice. Make it count.
Yeah, I've got one choice. I got one choice. So I really wanted to dig deep, and I wanted to think about I've got one choice now when it comes to films, when it comes to media, really. What do I like? What am I? And I'm a rom-com fan, Dan. Mm-hmm. I'm a heist movie fan.
Sure.
I'm a bit of a science fiction fan. And when it comes to films, I'm also a little bit of a completionist. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is where we're going next.
I knew it. Like, as soon as I set us up on the we're not doing Crystal Skull, and I realised you had the choice after, and also would probably want to see them all before Dial of Destiny, and wouldn't want to do it on your own time. But instead, making a point. Like, I was hoping you wouldn't, but I kind of knew you were going to do this.
There'd be no point. It'd be so weird to do it on my own time, though, wouldn't it? We'd end up talking about it anyway. Might as well record it.
Yeah. I fucking knew it. I had a bit of hope you might not do it when you started that spiel, but then it came back around. Because I mean, look, it makes sense. I had a feeling this was a possibility. Okay, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I guess we're doing the quadrilogy. Oh no, you can't. You can put your fucking bullshit about Alien being 4 movies down your fucking up your arse now.
We've still done a trilogy. Just my choice is a 4th movie. We've done the trilogy.
Yep.
We've wrapped up the trilogy. I don't think this is this can be a why is it not as good as those films, but this isn't I don't think next week's ends with how do we feel about the Indiana Jones movies like we've just done. I think next week's is just a review of a sequel, and
we'll see. Because
I'm excited.
You know what? I've not seen it since it came out. maybe we'll find stuff to love in it. Maybe there's charm to it that I don't recall. But
I'm really excited to see if to see what it's all about. Considering that how bad this movie apparently is something that I've known about, and heard talked about on internet movie shows and all that sort of stuff for years. So I'm so intrigued now, having got the context, having seen the first 3 movies. Of course, it's the only choice.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because recently this has come up a lot. Forgetting Dial of Destiny for a second, in relation to Star Trek, because Star Trek introduced this year in Picard season 3 a character that is Picard's son, and the running thing I saw on Twitter the minute that character was introduced is, oh Christ, is this going to be Star Trek's version of Mutt Williams? Now, Mutt Williams is a challenging character, so we're really going to have to. We're going to have to address this. Mutt Williams.
But also, Indiana Jones isn't the only film. A Good Day to Die Hard is really victim of random son, but nowhere near as charismatic or interesting.
But the problem is, I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is the most famous example of it. Still, it's the one everyone goes to.
That's fair.
It's the one everyone went to when Picard did it. It's still. And even recently I watched the video interview between Terry Matalas and I always forget the guy's name, the reviewer that you always did that used to be with Screen Junkies.
Oh, Dan Merrill.
Yeah, Dan Merrill. That's his name, Dan Merrill. They even talked about was their fear of it becoming Mutt Williams. It was literally.
Oh wow.
it was really, really. Covered it just seems to be the iconic example of this. Whether it is the worst example of it or not, we'll find out, I guess, next week.
Yeah, because I'm intrigued. Is it because do they overtly try and set him up as and now we're going to follow this character, and was the plan we'll do these movies again with just was it Creed? Was it the Creed situation? Have the older character in the first one and then gradually just focus on the younger character for the later movies.
I don't recall, because I watched it the once and it was so bad and everyone agreed it was bad that it was just never. You know what I mean? It was they weren't doing more of it. It was. You know what I mean? Crystal Skull wasn't getting a direct sequel, no matter what happened. So, although. When has that ever stopped? When has bad reaction to a movie ever stopped anyone when it made that much money? Because Crystal Skull made $800 million on a $200 million budget. That's not nothing.
If that's the difference between money and budget, but I think it's Spielberg, Ford, Lucas wouldn't have wanted to. Do you know what I mean? I think I would suspect the studio offered.
Yeah, so that's the question. That is the question, and we're gonna have to take a look. So next. Yeah. So wish I hadn't said anything, but for opening my big mouth and being very determined, we weren't gonna do it. We are, of course, because Chris is a bastard.
Oh, I think, to be fair, it's only one movie. I would have chosen this anyway, even if you hadn't have been. So now we're not doing it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Well, here we go. Next week, come back for Indiana Jones: The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If you want to hear it early, of course, if you're listening to this on Spotify and iTunes or any of those places, you can go over to our Patreon right now, and for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to it a week early and find out what we thought, with a bit of time and distance and some healing, of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's going to be interesting. Of course, the Patreon also has exclusive content such as Nothing But Lyrics, which is a podcast where we review the lyrics to a song and make fun of it or analyse it, depending on how we feel. Sometimes both. The rule of thumb now is there'll be something exclusive for the patrons on the first of every month. Nothing But Lyrics for the first couple of months, because we're enjoying doing that at the moment. Beyond that, we might decide to do another episode of Nothing But Claps. We may end up thinking of a third thing we can just do every now and then. They're going to be a bit sporadic in terms of what they are, I think, but Nothing But Lyrics for the foreseeable future, because it's quite a fun premise and we were enjoying doing it, so we'll probably keep doing that for now. But at a certain point, maybe we'll throw in a random episode of something else. There's our bonus podcast of some description first of every month going forward. I think that's pretty straightforward. They're not going to be massively long, 30 to 45 minutes, I think, for the first Nothing But Lyric episodes. And we'll just see. We'll see. Shrug.
For sure. Yeah, they're good. They're good fun. Check them out if you can afford it. If you're able and willing to give us some as little as $1 a month, as Dan said. If you're not able to, not willing to, not a problem at all.
Yes, we've made a real concerted effort in the past to not really like do anything major behind that paywall. So the stuff we're now doing exclusive to that is just fun little side stuff. Nothing that if you're a listener of our things and you like what we do and you check out multiple of our podcasts, you can't afford the patron, it's fine. We've deliberately designed it so you're not really missing out. If that makes sense. The other ways you can support us without financially, you can go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, or head over to your podcast platform of choice and review and like, and let us know about your rewind reviews. What movies have you gone back to in your adult life that you've maybe still enjoyed, not enjoyed as much? Tell us about that in the reviews. It's fun. At some point I'll read through them and maybe we'll read a couple out on the podcast itself. I haven't had a chance to have a look yet, but they're always fun to see. You can contact us via email if you'd like, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk, or of course you can go to the YouTube page and find the video for this very podcast and put your feedback down below. We don't really do Twitter anymore, but there are Twitter handles, I guess, @Dan Doolan, @CBillingham. But I sort of look at it once a week now, and I don't really do a lot on it. So yeah, it's just sort of checking it out of habit. Anything else? There's probably more stuff. If I haven't said it already, youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk is our YouTube link. But I think that's everything. Yeah, why not? We're going to say that's everything. So thank you all so much for listening, and of course, make sure you stick with us to find out. To be fair, I am quite curious how Kingdom.
I'm excited. I'm very excited about it.
I'm curious, especially after just rewatching them. Like, is it really going to be like drinking something sour? Is this going to be like orange juice after brushing your teeth? Like, it feels like it might be, but we'll see. Especially after just doing the original trilogy. So yeah. Come back for that in a week. I'm going to hand over to Chris because Chris ends these, and I'm clearly tiredly rambling.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.
Finally.